The relentless San Francisco rain pelted against the windows of the opulent Hawthorne mansion, mirroring the tears that threatened to spill from Emily Carter's eyes. At 28, she stood in the grandiose foyer, her threadbare sweater a stark contrast to the marble floors and crystal chandeliers that surrounded her. With trembling hands, she smoothed down her simple ponytail and took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "You there, girl!" The sharp voice of Veronica Hawthorne, the lady of the house, cut through the air like a knife. "I hope you're not tracking mud onto my imported Italian tiles." Emily's heart sank as she looked down at her well-worn sneakers. "No, Mrs. Hawthorne. I wiped them thoroughly before coming in." Veronica's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. "Never mind that. The twins need attending to. And for heaven's sake, try to look a little more presentable. You're working for the Hawthornes now, not some backwater family in the Midwest." Fighting back the urge to remind Mrs. Hawthorne that she was from a respectable family in Ohio, Emily simply nodded and made her way up the grand staircase. As she climbed, her mind wandered to the circumstances that had brought her here, a series of misfortunes that had left her with no choice but to accept this position as a nanny to the Hawthorne twins. Just 6 months ago, Emily had been a promising medical student at Stanford University. Her dreams of becoming a pediatrician were within reach, fueled by her compassionate nature and brilliant mind. But fate had other plans. A devastating car accident had claimed the lives of her parents and younger sister, leaving Emily not only grief-stricken but also burdened with overwhelming medical bills and funeral expenses. With no other family to turn to and her savings depleted, Emily had been forced to put her studies on hold. The position with the Hawthornes had seemed like a godsend at first, a chance to earn money while living in the city where she hoped to eventually resume her education. Little did she know that it would become a crucible of humiliation and heartache. As Emily reached the nursery, the cries of the Hawthorne twins, Sophia and Sebastian, greeted her. At just 3 years old, they were already showing signs of the entitled behavior that their mother exemplified. Yet, Emily couldn't help but feel a surge of affection for the children. It wasn't their fault that they were being raised in such an emotionally sterile environment. "Miss Emily," Sebastian called out, his tear-streaked face brightening at the sight of her. "Mommy said you were too poor to buy nice clothes. Is that true?" Emily's heart clenched at the innocent cruelty of the child's words. "No, sweetheart," she said gently, kneeling down to his level. "I just prefer simple clothes. Now, how about we read a story?" As she settled into the plush rocking chair with a twin on each knee, Emily allowed herself a moment of bittersweet reflection. This scene, reading to children, nurturing their minds and hearts, was so close to the future she had envisioned for herself. Yet here she was, not as Dr. Carter, but as the lowly nanny, barely tolerated by her employers. The days at the Hawthorne mansion blurred together in a haze of menial tasks and thinly veiled insults. Veronica seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding Emily of her place, often in front of the household staff or, worse, the family's high society friends. "Oh, Emily," Veronica trilled one afternoon as she swept into the kitchen where Emily was preparing the twins' lunch. "Be a dear and fetch my Louboutins from the car. And do try not to scuff them with your common hands." Emily bit her lip, feeling the burning gazes of the cook and housekeeper on her back as she nodded and headed out to the garage. As she carefully retrieved the expensive shoes from the passenger seat of Veronica's Mercedes, a flash of red caught her eye. Tucked under the seat was a crumpled piece of paper, a medical bill, Emily realized with a start. Her eyes widened as she scanned the document. It was for a series of fertility treatments, dated just a few months before the twins' birth. Emily's mind raced. Could it be that the perfect Hawthorne family had needed help to conceive their precious heirs? Before she could process this information, the sound of footsteps on the gravel driveway snapped her back to reality. Emily quickly shoved the paper back where she'd found it and straightened up, clutching the shoes to her chest. "What's taking so long?" Veronica demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. "I swear, it's like you've never seen a pair of designer shoes before." "Oh, wait." She laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of any real mirth. Emily handed over the shoes, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne. It won't happen again." As Veronica sauntered back into the house, Emily remained rooted to the spot, her mind whirling. The discovery of the medical bill had opened up a world of questions. What other secrets were the Hawthornes hiding behind their facade of perfection? Little did Emily know, this small piece of information was just the tip of the iceberg. The Hawthorne family's carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down, and Emily would find herself at the center of a storm that would change her life forever. That evening, as Emily tucked the twins into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Sophia, usually the more reserved of the two, reached out and touched Emily's cheek with her small hand. "Miss Emily," she whispered, her eyes wide and serious. "Why does Mommy always look so sad when she thinks no one is watching?" The question caught Emily off guard. She had noticed Veronica's moments of melancholy, fleeting instants when the mask of haughty indifference slipped to reveal a woman who seemed lost. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," Emily replied carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have worries that make them sad. But that doesn't mean they don't love you very much." As she turned off the light and softly closed the nursery door, Emily's mind was racing. There was more to Veronica Hawthorne than met the eye, and for the first time, Emily felt a twinge of empathy for the woman who had made her life so difficult. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a rarity in the typically foggy San Francisco summer. Emily was up early, preparing breakfast for the twins when she heard raised voices coming from Mr. Hawthorne's study. Curiosity got the better of her, and she found herself inching closer to the partially open door. "Damn it, Veronica." Maxwell Hawthorne's usually composed voice was tight with anger. "How could you be so careless? If this gets out, everything we've worked for will be ruined." "I'm sorry, Max," Veronica sobbed, her carefully cultivated poise crumbling. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be happy. To make you happy." Emily's heart raced. What could have happened to upset the unflappable Hawthornes so thoroughly? She leaned in closer, straining to hear more. "The fertility clinic called," Maxwell continued, his voice lowering to a harsh whisper. "There was a mix-up with the embryos. The twins, they might not be ours." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Emily processed this information. The perfect Hawthorne twins, the crown jewels of San Francisco society, might be the biological children of complete strangers. It was a scandal that would rock the very foundations of their carefully constructed world. Before Emily could react, a small hand tugged at her sleeve. She looked down to see Sebastian, his blue eyes wide with confusion. "Miss Emily, why are Mommy and Daddy shouting?" Thinking quickly, Emily plastered on a reassuring smile. "They're just having a grown-up discussion, sweetheart. How about we go have some breakfast and then play in the garden? It's such a beautiful day." As she led Sebastian to the kitchen, Emily's mind was reeling. The revelation about the twins' potential parentage explained so much: Veronica's underlying sadness, the pressure the Hawthornes seemed to be under to maintain their perfect image. But what would happen now? And how would this affect the innocent children caught in the middle of it all? Over the next few days, tension in the Hawthorne household reached a fever pitch. Veronica oscillated between fits of tearful despair and icy detachment, while Maxwell buried himself in his work, barely acknowledging his family. The twins, sensitive to the change in atmosphere, became clingy and irritable. Emily found herself working overtime to shield Sophia and Sebastian from their parents' turmoil. She organized elaborate games in the garden, read countless stories, and even convinced the usually stern housekeeper to help her bake cookies. All the while, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing the unraveling of a family. It was during one of these marathon play sessions that Emily made another startling discovery. As she helped Sophia change after an enthusiastic encounter with a mud puddle, she noticed a small birthmark on the child's shoulder, a distinctive heart-shaped mark that looked eerily familiar. Emily's breath caught in her throat as a memory surfaced. Her younger sister, Emma, had had an identical birthmark in the exact same spot. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Emma had died in the car crash along with their parents, hadn't she? The room seemed to spin as Emily's mind raced through the possibilities. The fertility clinic mix-up, the timing of the twins' birth, the uncanny resemblance Sophia bore to Emma's baby pictures. Could it be that the Hawthorne twins were actually her biological niece and nephew? Before she could fully process this earth-shattering realization, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by Veronica's anguished cry. Emily scooped up Sophia and rushed to investigate, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She found Veronica in the living room, surrounded by the shattered remains of what had once been a priceless vase. The woman's carefully coiffed hair was in disarray, her mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivulets. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Emily said softly, setting Sophia down and approaching cautiously. "Are you all right? Can I help?" Veronica's head snapped up, her eyes wild. "Help?" she spat. "How could someone like you possibly help? You have no idea what it's like to have everything you've ever wanted dangled in front of you, only to have it snatched away." Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. "Actually, Mrs. Hawthorne, I think I might understand better than you know. There's something I need to tell you about the twins." As Emily began to explain her suspicions, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Veronica's expression morphed from disdain to disbelief to a strange mix of hope and fear. By the time Emily finished speaking, both women were in tears. "How can this be possible?" Veronica whispered, her voice hoarse. "All this time, they've been right under our noses?" Emily shook her head, still trying to come to terms with the situation herself. "I can't be certain without a DNA test, but the coincidences are too strong to ignore. If I'm right, it means that Sophia and Sebastian are my family, the family I thought I'd lost forever." For a long moment, silence reigned in the opulent living room. Then, to Emily's utter astonishment, Veronica did something entirely unexpected. She laughed, a genuine, almost hysterical sound that seemed to release years of pent-up emotion. "Oh, the irony," Veronica gasped between fits of laughter and tears. "All this time, I've been treating you like dirt beneath my feet, and you might be the biological end of the children I've raised as my own." Emily, I don't know what to say. Emily, still reeling from the enormity of the situation, could only shake her head. "We need to confirm this, Mrs. Hawthorne. And we need to figure out what it means for all of us, especially for Sophia and Sebastian." As if on cue, the twins toddled into the room, drawn by the commotion. They looked from Emily to Veronica with wide, confused eyes. In that moment, Emily realized that regardless of biology, these children had become the center of her world. And judging by the fierce love in Veronica's eyes as she gathered them into her arms, she felt the same way. "We'll figure this out," Emily said softly, reaching out to smooth Sebastian's unruly hair. "Together." Veronica nodded, a glimmer of something like respect in her eyes. "Yes, we will. And Emily, I think it's time you called me Veronica." As the four of them huddled together in the midst of the broken vase, a fitting metaphor for their shattered illusions, Emily felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and hard decisions. But for the first time since losing her family, she felt like she might have found a new one in the most unexpected place imaginable. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test their resilience, challenge their perceptions, and ultimately redefine the very meaning of family. As the San Francisco fog rolled in, shrouding the Hawthorne mansion in ethereal mist, the stage was set for a drama that would captivate not just their social circle, but the entire city. In the days that followed, the Hawthorne household was a whirlwind of activity. DNA tests were discreetly arranged, lawyers were consulted, and hushed conversations filled every corner of the mansion. Through it all, Emily found herself in the surreal position of confidant to both Veronica and Maxwell, who seemed to be seeing her in a new light. One evening, as Emily was putting the twins to bed, she overheard a conversation that made her heart skip a beat. "I don't care what the tests say," Veronica's voice drifted from the hallway. "Those children are ours, Max. We've raised them, loved them. No piece of paper can change that." Maxwell's reply was softer, but no less intense. "Of course they're ours, darling. But we can't ignore the fact that Emily might be their biological aunt. She has rights too." Emily's hands trembled as she tucked the blankets around Sophia and Sebastian. The thought of potentially losing them was unbearable, but so was the idea of tearing them away from the only parents they'd ever known. How could they possibly navigate this minefield without someone getting hurt? As she tiptoed out of the nursery, Emily came face to face with Veronica and Maxwell. For a moment, the three adults stood frozen, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. Finally, Veronica broke the silence. "Emily, we need to talk." And so began a series of late-night conversations that would change the course of all their lives. Over cups of tea in the Hawthorne's lavish kitchen, they shared stories, fears, and eventually, hopes for the future. Emily learned of Veronica's struggles with infertility, the pressure she felt to produce an heir for the Hawthorne legacy. In turn, she opened up about her own loss, the dreams she'd had to put on hold, and the unexpected love she developed for Sophia and Sebastian. As dawn broke over San Francisco Bay, casting a golden glow through the kitchen windows, a tentative plan began to take shape. It was unconventional, to say the least, but it offered a glimmer of hope for a future where everyone's needs could be met. "What if," Maxwell said slowly, his usually confident voice tinged with uncertainty, "we were to share custody? Emily could continue her studies, with our financial support, and remain a part of the twins' lives. We could present a united front to the world, a modern family for modern times." Veronica and Emily exchanged a look of cautious optimism. It wouldn't be easy, there would be legal hurdles, social stigma, and countless challenges ahead. But as Emily looked at the faces of the two people who had gone from her tormentors to potential allies, she felt a surge of hope. It was a fragile, tentative feeling, but it was there nonetheless. "It won't be easy," Emily said softly, voicing the thoughts that were undoubtedly running through all their minds. "But if we're all committed to doing what's best for Sophia and Sebastian, I think we can make it work." Veronica nodded, her usual haughty demeanor softened by exhaustion and vulnerability. "We'll need to be discreet, of course. The society pages would have a field day if they got wind of this unconventional arrangement." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I'll speak with our lawyers first thing in the morning. We'll need ironclad agreements in place to protect everyone's interests." As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the kitchen windows, the unlikely trio raised their teacups in a silent toast to their fledgling alliance. None of them could have predicted the storms that lay ahead, but in that moment, a seed of unity had been planted. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, hushed phone calls, and clandestine meetings. Emily found herself in the surreal position of being both an employee of the Hawthornes and a potential co-parent to their children. The dynamics of the household shifted subtly but profoundly. Veronica, who had once delighted in pointing out Emily's every perceived flaw, now sought her advice on the twins' care with an almost desperate eagerness. Maxwell, previously a distant figure who barely acknowledged Emily's existence, now greeted her each morning with a nod and a quiet "Good morning, Emily." But it was the children who truly blossomed under this new arrangement. Sophia and Sebastian, sensing the change in the air, seemed to glow with happiness. They reveled in the increased attention from all the adults in their lives, soaking up the love like little sponges. One sunny afternoon, as Emily supervised the twins in the garden, she overheard a conversation that made her heart swell. "Mommy," Sophia said, her little face scrunched up in concentration as she wove daisy chains, "is Miss Emily going to be our new mommy too?" Veronica, who had been watching from the terrace, stiffened for a moment before kneeling down beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, Emily is. She's a very special part of our family now. She loves you very much, just like Daddy and I do. Is that okay with you?" Sophia nodded solemnly. "I like having two mommies. Can we have two daddies too?" Emily couldn't help but chuckle at the innocent question, catching Veronica's eye over Sophia's head. To her surprise, Veronica's lips twitched in an answering smile. It was a small moment, but it felt like a milestone in their evolving relationship. However, not everyone was as accepting of the new family dynamic. As rumors of the Hawthornes' unorthodox living situation began to circulate in their elite social circle, the whispers and sidelong glances multiplied. At a charity gala hosted by the San Francisco Opera, Emily found herself thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Veronica had insisted on her attending, arguing that if Emily was to be part of their family, she needed to be introduced to society properly. Dressed in a borrowed gown that cost more than her entire wardrobe, Emily felt like an imposter as she navigated the glittering crowd. She was acutely aware of the curious stares and hushed conversations that seemed to follow her every move. "Is that her?" she overheard one bejeweled matron whisper to her companion. "The nanny who's trying to worm her way into the Hawthorne fortune?" "I heard she seduced Maxwell," another voice hissed. Poor Veronica must be beside herself. Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation. She was about to flee to the safety of the powder room when she felt a hand on her arm. Turning, she found herself face to face with Veronica, resplendent in a designer gown and dripping with diamonds. "Ignore them, darling," Veronica said, loud enough for the nearby gossips to hear. "They're just jealous that we have such a wonderful addition to our family." Emily blinked in surprise at the unexpected show of support. Veronica linked their arms, steering Emily towards a group of influential-looking men and women. "Come, let me introduce you to the board members of the Children's Hospital. I was just telling them about your background in medicine." As Veronica smoothly integrated Emily into the conversation, skillfully highlighting her intelligence and compassion, Emily felt a surge of gratitude. It wasn't just for the social maneuvering, but for the genuine effort Veronica was making to include her in this world. Later that evening, as they rode home in the back of the Hawthorne's limousine, Emily turned to Veronica. "Thank you," she said softly, "for what you did back there. You didn't have to defend me." Veronica's perfectly manicured hand found Emily's and squeezed gently. "Yes, I did. We're in this together now, remember? Besides," she added with a wry smile, "I've been the subject of their gossip for years. It's rather refreshing to give them something new to talk about." As they shared a quiet laugh, Emily marveled at how far they'd come. The woman who had once seemed like her nemesis was now becoming something akin to a friend. It was a reminder that people could surprise you if given the chance. But not everyone was as adaptable as Veronica. Maxwell, despite his initial support of their arrangement, began to withdraw as the weeks passed. Emily often caught him staring at her with an unreadable expression, his brow furrowed in what looked like concern or perhaps regret. One evening, as Emily was tidying up the twins' playroom, Maxwell appeared in the doorway. His usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, and there was a haunted look in his eyes that made Emily's heart race with apprehension. "Emily," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk. Privately." Feeling a sense of foreboding, Emily followed Maxwell to his study. As he closed the door behind them, she couldn't help but notice how his hand shook slightly. "What's wrong, Mr. Hawthorne?" she asked, reverting to formality in her nervousness. Maxwell paced the room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "This arrangement. I don't think it's working. The board of directors at my company has gotten wind of our situation. They're concerned about the potential scandal, the impact on our stock prices." Emily's heart sank. She had known that their unconventional family setup would face challenges, but she hadn't expected them to come from this direction. "What are you saying, exactly?" Maxwell stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression a mix of regret and determination. "I think it would be best if you left, Emily. We can set you up with a generous severance package, enough for you to finish your studies and start a new life somewhere else. But you need to agree to relinquish any claim to the twins." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Leave? Relinquish her claim to Sophia and Sebastian? The very thought made her feel sick. But we had an agreement. Veronica and we've been working so hard to make this work. The children are happy. "I know," Maxwell said, his voice softening slightly. "But sometimes, what makes us happy isn't what's best for everyone involved. Think about it, Emily. The twins will have every advantage here. With us, they'll want for nothing. Can you truly offer them the same?" Emily felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "With all due respect, Mr. Hawthorne, material advantages aren't everything. Those children need love, understanding, and connection. I may not be able to give them designer clothes or fancy vacations, but I can give them that." Maxwell's expression hardened. "I'm not asking, Emily. I'm telling you. This is what's going to happen. I suggest you start packing your things." As he strode out of the study, leaving Emily standing there in shocked silence, she felt as if her world was crumbling around her. How could things have gone so wrong, so quickly? Numbly, she made her way back to her small room in the servants' quarters. As she began to mechanically fold her clothes, her mind raced with possibilities. Should she fight this? Take legal action? But with what resources? The Hawthornes had an army of lawyers at their disposal. She was just one person, with no money and no real power. A soft knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened it to find Veronica standing there, her face pale and drawn. "May I come in?" Veronica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. For a moment, they stood in awkward silence, the air heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Veronica spoke. "Maxwell told me what he said to you. I want you to know that I don't agree with him. This isn't what I want." Emily felt a glimmer of hope. "Then help me fight this, Veronica. We can make this work, I know we can." But Veronica shook her head, tears gleaming in her eyes. "I can't go against my husband, Emily. You have to understand. This world we live in, appearances are everything. If we push this, if we make it public, the scandal could destroy everything we've built." Emily felt as if she'd been slapped. "So that's it? You're just going to let him push me out? After everything we've been through?" Veronica reached out, grasping Emily's hands in her own. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I truly am. But maybe Maxwell is right. Maybe this is for the best. You're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. You could start fresh, without all this complicated history weighing you down. As Veronica's words washed over her, Emily felt a strange calm settling over her. She gently pulled her hands away, straightening her spine and lifting her chin. I see. Well, thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Hawthorne. If you'll excuse me, I have some packing to do. Veronica flinched at the return to formality, but nodded sadly. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, Emily. I wish things could have been different. Once Veronica had gone, Emily sank onto her bed, her mind whirling. She thought of Sophia and Sebastian, of the bond they'd formed, of the future she'd begun to imagine for all of them. Could she really just walk away from that? As the night wore on, Emily tossed and turned, unable to find rest. By the time the first light of dawn began to creep through her window, she had made a decision. She wouldn't go quietly into the night. She would fight for her place in this family, for her right to be part of Sophia and Sebastian's lives. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone and dialed a number she'd hoped she'd never have to use. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Jameson and Associates, how may I direct your call? Emily took a deep breath. My name is Emily Carter. I need to speak with Mr. Jameson about a potential custody case. As she began to explain her situation to the sympathetic receptionist, Emily felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through her veins. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, possibly even ugly. But for the sake of those 2 precious children, she was willing to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know, her decision to fight would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of San Francisco society, expose long-buried secrets, and test the limits of love, loyalty, and family. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and hushed phone calls. Emily, operating in a state of heightened alertness, was careful to maintain her usual routine with the twins. She didn't want to alarm them or give the Hawthornes any reason to restrict her access prematurely. But the strain was beginning to show. Sophia, always the more sensitive of the twins, seemed to pick up on the tension in the house. One afternoon, as Emily was helping her build a tower of blocks, the little girl looked up with wide, worried eyes. Miss Emily, she said, her voice small, are you going away? The question caught Emily off guard, and she had to swallow hard past the lump in her throat. Why do you ask that, sweetheart? Sophia shrugged, her little shoulders drooping. I heard Mommy and Daddy fighting. Daddy said you had to go away, but Mommy was crying. I don't want you to go away, Miss Emily. Emily gathered the child into her arms, holding her close. Oh, Sophia. I don't want to go away either. I love you and Sebastian very much. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about what's best. But I promise you, no matter what happens, I will always love you and always be there for you if you need me. As she comforted Sophia, Emily's resolve strengthened. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for these children who had become the center of her world. Meanwhile, the Hawthorne household was in turmoil. Maxwell and Veronica's arguments echoed through the halls, their voices rising and falling like the tide. The staff exchanged worried glances, wondering what this meant for their futures. Emily did her best to shield the twins from the worst of it, organizing outings to the park and impromptu puppet shows in the nursery. But she couldn't entirely erase the shadow that had fallen over their once happy home. It was during one of these tense afternoons that Emily received an unexpected visitor. She was in the garden with the twins, supervising their attempts at planting sunflower seeds, when she heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. Looking up, she saw a sleek black car pull up. A moment later, an elegant woman in her 60s emerged, her silver hair swept up in a classic chignon. There was something regal about her bearing that immediately commanded attention. As the woman approached, Emily felt a flutter of recognition. She'd seen this face before in the family portraits that lined the halls of the Hawthorne mansion. This was Eleanor Hawthorne, Maxwell's mother and the family matriarch. "So," Eleanor said, her sharp eyes taking in the scene before her. "You must be Emily." Emily straightened, suddenly acutely aware of her simple sundress and the smudges of dirt on her hands. "Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hawthorne." Eleanor's gaze softened as it fell on Sophia and Sebastian, who were watching the exchange with wide-eyed curiosity. "And these must be my great-grandchildren. Hello, little ones." To Emily's surprise, Eleanor knelt down on the grass, seemingly unconcerned about her expensive suit. She spoke softly to the twins, asking about their gardening project with genuine interest. After a few minutes, she looked up at Emily. "Why don't you take the children inside for their snack? I think you and I need to have a talk." Feeling a mix of trepidation and curiosity, Emily ushered the twins inside, leaving them in the capable hands of the housekeeper. When she returned to the garden, she found Eleanor seated on a wrought iron bench, patting the space beside her in invitation. As Emily sat down, Eleanor spoke, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I've heard quite a lot about you, my dear. Some of it good, some of it less so. But I've learned over the years not to put too much stock in gossip. I prefer to make my own judgments." Emily nodded, unsure of how to respond. Eleanor continued, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "You know, when I first married into the Hawthorne family, I was considered quite the scandal myself. A shopkeeper's daughter, marrying the heir to one of San Francisco's oldest fortunes? The society pages had a field day." This was news to Emily. She'd always assumed that Eleanor was born into the same rarefied world as the rest of the Hawthornes. I didn't know that, ma'am." Eleanor's lips curved in a wry smile. "No, I don't suppose you would. It's not a story we advertise. But I fought my way into this family, tooth and nail. I learned to navigate the treacherous waters of high society, to hold my head high even when the whispers and stares threatened to drown me." Emily listened, fascinated by this glimpse into a past she'd never imagined. Eleanor turned to her, her gaze sharp and assessing. "You remind me a bit of myself at your age, Emily. That same fire, that same determination. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. In this world, you can't fight alone. You need allies, people willing to stand beside you when the storms come." With a graceful movement, Eleanor reached into her handbag and withdrew a business card. "This is the contact information for Jerome Sullivan. He's the best family law attorney in the state and an old friend of mine. Tell him I sent you." Emily's hand shook slightly as she took the card. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I don't know what to say. Why are you helping me?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Because, my dear, I've watched those children blossom under your care. I've seen the way they light up when you enter a room. And because, well, let's just say I have my suspicions about certain things. Things that, if true, would make you as much a part of this family as any of us." As Eleanor rose to leave, she placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "Whatever happens, remember this, true family is about love, not blood. Fight for what you believe in, Emily. And know that you're not alone in that fight." With those parting words, Eleanor glided back to her waiting car, leaving Emily stunned and hopeful on the garden bench. As she watched the elegant matriarch drive away, Emily felt a surge of renewed determination. She wasn't just a lowly nanny fighting against impossible odds anymore. She had an ally, and a powerful one at that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal consultations, depositions, and tense encounters in the Hawthorne mansion. Jerome Sullivan, true to Eleanor's word, proved to be a formidable advocate. He dug into the fertility clinic records, unearthing discrepancies and questionable practices that cast doubt on the Hawthornes' legal claim to the twins. As the case progressed, the strain began to show on everyone involved. Maxwell threw himself into his work, barely spending any time at home. Veronica oscillated between fits of tearful despair and icy determination to keep her family intact. But it was the children who suffered the most. Sophia and Sebastian, too young to understand the complexities of the situation, sensed the tension and became clingy and irritable. Emily's heart broke a little more each time she had to soothe their fears or answer their innocent questions about why everyone seemed so angry. One rainy afternoon, as Emily was helping the twins build a pillow fort in the playroom, Veronica appeared in the doorway. Her usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Emily," she said softly, "can we talk? Please?" Surprised by the plea in Veronica's voice, Emily nodded. She tucked the twins into their fort with a stack of picture books and followed Veronica to the solarium, a room filled with lush plants and bathed in natural light despite the gloomy weather outside. For a long moment, the two women sat in silence, the patter of rain against the glass roof the only sound. Finally, Veronica spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted any of this, you know. The society life, the constant pressure to be perfect. I just wanted a family. Children to love." Emily felt a pang of empathy. Despite everything that had happened, she couldn't help but see the pain etched on Veronica's face. "I understand that," she said gently. "But Veronica, those children, they're my family too. Surely there's a way we can both be part of their lives?" Veronica's laugh was bitter and tinged with hysteria. "Oh, Emily. Sweet, naive Emily. You don't understand. If this goes to court, if the truth comes out, it won't just be about custody. It will destroy everything. The Hawthorne name, our reputation, the children's future. Is that what you want?" Emily leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Of course not. But Veronica, think about it. We could present a united front. A modern family, choosing to come together for the sake of the children. It doesn't have to be a scandal if we don't let it be." For a moment, hope flickered in Veronica's eyes. But then her expression hardened. "It's too late for that. Maxwell, he's made up his mind. He says we have to fight this to the bitter end, no matter the cost." As Veronica buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, Emily felt a surge of frustration. How had things gotten so out of control? There had to be a way to resolve this without destroying everyone involved. Just then, a commotion from the hallway caught their attention. The sound of running feet and excited voices echoed through the house. Before either woman could react, the solarium door burst open, revealing a breathless Maxwell. "Veronica, Emily," he panted, his usual composure completely shattered. "You need to come quickly. It's about the twins." Fear gripped Emily's heart as she and Veronica followed Maxwell to his study. Had something happened to Sophia and Sebastian? But as they entered the room, they found not tragedy, but a scene of controlled chaos. Eleanor Hawthorne was there, along with Jerome Sullivan and a man Emily didn't recognize. Papers were strewn across Maxwell's usually immaculate desk, and everyone was talking at once. "What's going on?" Veronica demanded, her voice shrill with panic. "Where are the children?" Eleanor stepped forward, her calm presence immediately commanding attention. "The children are fine, dear. They're still playing in the fort Emily built for them." But we've made a discovery that changes everything. Jerome Sullivan nodded, his expression grave. We've been digging into the records of the fertility clinic, as you know. But we've also been conducting our own DNA tests with samples provided by Emily. Emily's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The moment of truth. The unknown man stepped forward, introducing himself as Dr. Reeves, a geneticist. The results are conclusive, he said, his voice steady. Emily is indeed the biological aunt of Sophia and Sebastian. But there's more. He paused, his gaze moving from face to face. The tests also show a close genetic match to you, Mr. Hawthorne. The room erupted into chaos. Veronica let out a strangled cry, Maxwell staggered back as if physically struck, and Emily felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her feet. What are you saying? Maxwell whispered, his face ashen. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. Based on these results, it appears that you, Mr. Hawthorne, are the biological father of the twins. And Emily's late sister was their mother. The revelation hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Emily's mind raced, trying to make sense of this impossible twist. How could Maxwell be the twins' father? She'd never even met him before coming to work for the Hawthornes. And then, like a bolt of lightning, a memory surfaced. Emily's sister, Emma, tearfully confessing to a one-night stand at a charity gala just before the accident that claimed her life. She'd never revealed the name of the man, only that he was wealthy and married. Oh my God, Emily breathed, her eyes locking with Maxwell's. Recognition dawned in his gaze, followed quickly by horror and shame. Veronica's voice, when it came, was cold as ice. You bastard, she hissed at Maxwell. All this time, you knew, didn't you? You knew there was a chance. Maxwell's shoulders slumped in defeat. I suspected. When Emily first came to us, when I saw how much Sophia looked like her. But I convinced myself it was impossible. That the clinic couldn't have made such a monumental mistake. Eleanor stepped in, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. What's done is done. The question now is, where do we go from here? For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of the revelation seemed to press down on all of them, the implications too vast to process all at once. It was Emily who finally broke the silence. The children, she said softly. We need to think about what's best for Sophia and Sebastian. They deserve to know the truth about their heritage, but they also deserve stability and love. Veronica, who had sunk into a nearby chair, looked up with tear-filled eyes. And what about me? She asked, her voice breaking. I've raised those children from infancy. I've loved them as my own. Am I just supposed to step aside now? Emily moved to kneel beside Veronica's chair, taking the older woman's hands in her own. No, she said firmly. You're their mother in every way that matters. Biology isn't everything. We, all of us, we need to find a way to come together for Sophia and Sebastian's sake. Maxwell, who had been standing frozen by the window, turned to face the room. Emily's right, he said, his voice hoarse. I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people. But maybe this is a chance to make things right. To give our children the kind of family they deserve. Over the next few hours, as rain continued to pour outside, the adults in that study began the delicate process of reimagining what family could mean. There were tears and recriminations, moments of anger and moments of surprising tenderness. Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, took charge of managing the practical aspects. She worked with Jerome to draft a new agreement that would protect everyone's interests while prioritizing the well-being of the twins. As the night wore on, a tentative plan began to take shape. The Hawthorne mansion would remain the children's primary residence, with Emily moving into a guest suite to be close at hand. Veronica would retain her role as the twins' mother, with Emily officially recognized as their aunt and given equal say in major decisions regarding their upbringing. Maxwell, chastened by the revelation of his past indiscretion, agreed to step back from his all-consuming work schedule to focus on rebuilding his relationships with both his wife and his children. He also pledged a substantial portion of the Hawthorne fortune to a foundation in Emma's name, dedicated to supporting young, single mothers. It was far from a perfect solution, and everyone knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But as dawn broke over San Francisco, bathing the study in golden light, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. Emily, exhausted but filled with a strange mix of grief and hope, excused herself to check on the twins. She found them still asleep in their pillow fort, Sophia's arm thrown protectively over her brother. The sight brought tears to Emily's eyes. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, smoothing a stray curl from Sophia's forehead. "All of us, together." As she stood watching the sleeping children, Emily felt a presence behind her. Turning, she saw Veronica in the doorway, looking as worn and emotionally drained as Emily felt. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other, years of misunderstandings and conflict hanging between them. Then, slowly, Veronica held out her hand. "Partners?" she asked, her voice rough with emotion. Emily took Veronica's hand, feeling the tremor that ran through both of them at the contact. "Partners," she agreed. As they stood there, united in their love for the sleeping children, Emily realized that family could take many forms. It wasn't always neat or conventional, but at its core, it was about love, forgiveness, and the choice to stand by each other through life's storms. The weeks and months that followed were a period of intense adjustment for everyone involved. The Hawthorne mansion, once a bastion of rigid formality, slowly transformed into a warmer, more welcoming home. Emily moved into the guest suite, which was quickly redecorated to reflect her simpler tastes. The room became a favorite hangout for Sophia and Sebastian, who delighted in the cozy reading nook Emily created and the small indoor garden she cultivated on the windowsill. Veronica, freed from the crushing weight of societal expectations, began to rediscover parts of herself she'd long suppressed. She took up painting again, converting one of the mansion's many unused rooms into a light-filled studio. To everyone's surprise, she had a talent for capturing the tiny, everyday moments of family life, Sebastian's gap-toothed grin as he lost his first tooth, Sophia's look of fierce concentration as she learned to tie her shoelaces. Maxwell, true to his word, scaled back his work commitments. He started joining the family for dinner every night, awkwardly at first, but with increasing ease as time went on. On weekends, he could often be found in the garden with the twins, teaching them how to grow vegetables or build birdhouses. But perhaps the most profound change was in the relationship between Emily and Veronica. What had started as a wary truce slowly blossomed into a genuine friendship. They found common ground in their love for the children, but also discovered shared interests in literature and social causes. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset after putting the twins to bed, Veronica turned to Emily with a wry smile. "You know," she said, swirling the wine in her glass, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be co-parenting with my husband's former nanny, I'd have thought they were insane." Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "And if someone had told me I'd be living in a mansion and raising my sister's children with the help of San Francisco's elite, I'd have said the same thing." Veronica's expression grew serious. "I owe you an apology, Emily. The way I treated you when you first came here, it was inexcusable." Emily reached out, placing her hand over Veronica's. "We've both come a long way since then. What matters is where we are now, and where we're going." As if on cue, a peal of childish laughter drifted down from the nursery window. Both women smiled, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. But life, as they were learning, was rarely smooth sailing. Just as the new family dynamic was starting to feel settled, a new challenge arose. It came in the form of a letter, delivered on a crisp autumn morning. Emily was helping Sebastian with his reading when Maxwell entered the room, his face grave. "Emily," he said, his voice tight with tension, "we need to talk." The letter, it turned out, was from a cousin of Emily's late parents. Somehow, word of the Hawthorne situation had reached this distant relative, who was now claiming a right to custody of Sophia and Sebastian based on blood relation. They're threatening legal action, Maxwell explained, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "They're saying that neither Veronica nor I have a biological claim to the children, and that you're too young and inexperienced to be a suitable guardian." Emily felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. After everything they'd been through, after all the progress they'd made, was it all about to be undone? But as she looked around at the faces of her unlikely family, Veronica's determined frown, Maxwell's clenched jaw, Eleanor's steely gaze, she realized something important. They were no longer a collection of individuals with competing interests. They were a unit, bound together by love and shared experience. "We'll fight this," Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Together. And fight they did. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings, strategy sessions, and tense waiting. The cousin, it turned out, was more interested in the Hawthorne fortune than in the well-being of Sophia and Sebastian. But armed with Jerome Sullivan's legal expertise and Eleanor's social connections, they mounted a formidable defense. The case drew media attention, much to everyone's dismay. Paparazzi camped outside the mansion, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unconventional family at the center of what the tabloids were calling the Hawthorne heredity hullabaloo. But within the walls of the mansion, something remarkable was happening. Instead of driving them apart, the external threats seemed to bring the family closer together. Maxwell and Veronica presented a united front to the world, their past grievances set aside in the face of this new challenge. Emily found strength she never knew she possessed, standing tall in the courtroom as she testified about her love for the twins and her commitment to their well-being. Even the children, young as they were, sensed the gravity of the situation. Sophia and Sebastian became more affectionate, often crawling into Emily's lap for comfort or clinging to Veronica's hand during family outings. The case dragged on for months, each day bringing new twists and turns. But finally, on a rain-soaked morning in early spring, the judge delivered her verdict. The courtroom was packed as Judge Emilia Rodriguez cleared her throat, her eyes sweeping over the assembled crowd before settling on the Hawthorne family. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, she began, her voice steady and clear, "It is the opinion of this court that the best interests of Sophia and Sebastian Hawthorne are served by maintaining their current living situation." A collective gasp went up from the gallery. Emily felt Veronica's hand tighten around hers, while Maxwell let out a shaky breath. Judge Rodriguez continued, "The unique family structure created by Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, along with Ms. Emily Carter, demonstrates a level of commitment and love that this court finds admirable. While unconventional, it provides a stable and nurturing environment for the children." She paused, her gaze sharpening as it fell on the plaintiff, Emily's distant cousin who sat scowling in the front row. Furthermore, this court finds the plaintiff's claim to be without merit, motivated more by financial considerations than genuine concern for the children's welfare. As the judge continued to detail her ruling, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. Against all odds, their unconventional family had been recognized and validated by the law. Outside the courthouse, as reporters clamored for statements and cameras flashed, the family huddled together. Veronica, her eyes shining with tears, pulled Emily into a tight embrace. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." Maxwell, his arm around Eleanor's shoulders, nodded solemnly. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we'll do it together." In the weeks that followed, life at the Hawthorne mansion settled into a new rhythm. The media frenzy gradually died down, replaced by a sense of calm and purpose. The family worked with a therapist to navigate the complexities of their situation, learning to communicate more openly and address conflicts as they arose. Emily, with the full support of the Hawthornes, resumed her medical studies. She balanced her coursework with her responsibilities to the twins, often studying late into the night after tucking them into bed. Veronica surprised everyone by enrolling in art classes at the local community college, rediscovering her passion for painting. Maxwell, true to his word, continued to be a more present father and husband. He and Veronica began couples counseling, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been fractured by years of secrets and resentments. As for Sophia and Sebastian, they thrived under the love and attention of their expanded family. They grew into curious, compassionate children, secure in the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally by all the adults in their lives. On the twins' 7th birthday, as the family gathered in the garden for a celebration, Emily found herself overwhelmed by a sense of gratitude. She watched as Sophia blew out the candles on her cake, Sebastian clapping enthusiastically beside her. Veronica and Maxwell stood arm in arm, looking happier and more relaxed than Emily had ever seen them. Eleanor sat nearby, her eyes twinkling as she watched her great-grandchildren. As the summer breeze carried the sound of laughter across the lawn, Emily realized that this was what true family looked like. Not bound by blood alone, but forged through love, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand by each other through life's storms. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the twins were put to bed, Emily found herself alone on the terrace. She gazed out at the twinkling lights of San Francisco, marveling at the journey that had brought her here. A soft voice interrupted her reverie. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Emily turned to see Veronica approaching, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She accepted one with a smile. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she said softly. "It's hard to believe there was a time when we could barely stand to be in the same room together." Veronica chuckled, shaking her head. "We've certainly had quite the adventure, haven't we?" She raised her glass in a toast. "To family, in all its beautiful, messy, unconventional glory." As they clinked glasses, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, more moments of doubt and struggle. But she knew now that she wouldn't face them alone. She had found her place, her purpose, her family. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Emily Carter, once a humble nanny, now a beloved aunt, co-parent, and soon-to-be doctor, knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be.